sessions of today and also hope to ensure that the flow of events take rather seamlessly. Let me begin by giving you a brief glimpse of events planned for the day. Right now, we'll have a special session based on the theme India-Vietnam Relations, Exploring and Building on the Buddhism Connect, an Emerging Area of Cooperation. This will be followed by a film screening of Sacred Buddhist Dance, directed by Mr. Binoy K. Behel. After that, we'll break for lunch from 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. And after that, we'll reconvene here at the same place for the second session of the day based on the book, the Kal Chakra Tantra, Translation, Annotation and Commentary. This will be followed by a conversation on traveling in footsteps of Buddha. And finally, we'll have our valedictory session, which will begin from 3:45 p.m. onwards. So that's a glimpse of the programs scheduled for the day. Now, having stated the list of events scheduled for the day, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone present here as we begin our special session on India-Vietnam relations, exploring and building on the Buddhism Connect and emerging areas of cooperation. India and Vietnam share a bond that extends beyond diplomacy and trade, a bond rooted in history, culture, and spirituality. Buddhism serves as a profound bridge between our two nations, shaping our shared heritage and fostering people-to-people ties for centuries. The journey of Buddhism from India to Vietnam has not only enriched religious and philosophical exchanges, but has also strengthened cultural and educational collaborations. In recent years, this connection has expanded into new domains, including economic partnerships, strategic cooperation, technology, and sustainable development. As both nations look forward a future of shared prosperity, it becomes essential to explore how our deep-rooted ties can serve as a foundation for emerging collaborations in various fields. Today, we are privileged to have distinguished dignitaries who will share their insights on this enduring relationship and its evolving dimension. Without further ado, let us begin this enlightening session. And I'd like to invite all our esteemed dignitaries on stage to commence today's proceedings. May I request Shri Ranajit Rai ji, former Indian ambassador to Hungary, Vietnam, and Nepal, on the stage. Please give him a huge round of applause. I'd also like to invite Shri Sanjeev Kumar ji, Professor of Political Science at Zakir Hussain College, University of Delhi. May I request Dr. Baladas Ghoshal, former Professor of Southeast Asia and Southwest Pacific Studies and Chairman of Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies at JNU. I'd now request Dr. Tik Ha Chang, independent scholar specializing in Buddhism, cultural diplomacy, and soft power, on stage. I also request Dr. Dhrubajyoti Bhattacharya, Research Fellow at Indian Council of World Affairs, to join us on stage. I'd now request Dr. Sonu Trivedi, Associate Professor, Zakir Hussain College, University of Delhi, to join us on stage, please. We would now like to present them with a special painting as a token of our gratitude. I would like to mention that these paintings have been designed by grassroots level children of Deshkal societies, especially to honor all the guests present at Bodhgaya 7th edition dialogues. So, uh, with that being said, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. I would now like to introduce you all to the moderator of this special session, Shri Sanjeev Kumarji, Professor of Political Science at Zakir Hussain College, Delhi. He is a distinguished scholar and professor of University of Delhi. With over 2 decades of teaching and research experience, he has made significant contributions to political philosophy, citizenship and rights, conflict resolution, and Gandhian thought. A prolific writer, his works appear in Economic and Political Weekly, Indian Sociological Review, and the Indian Express. His acclaimed book, Gandhi and Contemporary World, underscores the relevance of Gandhian principles today. His contributions have been recognized with the Dr. S. Radhakrishnan Memorial Award and an Award of Excellence from Gandhi Bhavan. We are honored to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Sanjeev Kumar. Sir, I hand over the session to you now.
Thank you for your kind words of appreciation. This is a very momentous occasion for all of us, and it's my privilege and honor to be a part of this very important initiative. And this is the 7th edition of the Bodhgaya Global Dialogue. And I'm extremely thankful to Dr. Sanjay Kumar for having given me an opportunity to be a part of this August gathering. The initiative has a rich history, and I'm sure the proceedings yesterday and today will lead to a new, areas where both India and Vietnam, because this current session is on Indo-Vietnam relationships, how the countries, who have historically been, rooted in terms of their civilizational legacies, and particularly the way in which we are bewildered with the kind of confronting reality, the global crisis, the challenges, of trying to reconcile the truth, peace, conflict. So in that context, this special session on Indo-Vietnam relationship will explore new areas where we need to bring in areas of cooperation, peace building, and in that context, I'm very happy to have a group of very eminent scholars amongst the panelists. Today we will have Dr. Sri Ranjit Rai ji, the former Indian ambassador to Hungary, Vietnam, and Nepal. Is a very eminent Indian diplomat, and he will be chairing the session today. We will also I hope the chief guest, I'm told perhaps he's busy with some engagement, so probably he will not be with us. But he has sent a strong, he has sent his, congratulatory message, His Excellency Sri Nguyen Thang Hai. I think since this session is from 10 to 12, and we have, I think, we are already late by few minutes. So before I hand over the proceeding to the chair, may I request all the panelists to maybe conclude your, talk within the time limit of 15 to 20 minutes, so that we can have some time for discussion, because we have audience who will be waiting to have some observations, some inputs. So with that, I would like to in the first place, I would like to request Sri Ranjit Ray to share his preliminary remarks before I introduce and call over the other panelists to share their important inputs for this proceeding. May I welcome the chair, Sri Ranjit Rai, to the dais. Please welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Sanjeev Kumar, and it's really a great pleasure to be here with all of you. I would like to thank the Deshkal Society, the ICWA, the Dr. Ambedkar Center for hosting us and for organizing the 7th edition of Global Dialogues on Buddhism. I've just had the good fortune of coming back from Nalanda. I had gone there for a conference at the new Nalanda University and was able to see the ruins as well. And then on the way back to visit the sacred Bodhi temple. And what struck me both in the Nalanda University and in Bodhgaya was the number of Vietnamese visitors and pilgrims that I saw. There are several Vietnamese students, monks also at the Nalanda University. And of course, in Bodhgaya, there were special pujas that were organized by Vietnamese monks for pilgrims from Vietnam under the Bodhi temple. So clearly this is a very thriving and robust tradition in Vietnam, and so it's appropriate that we discuss Vietnam today. For me, before moving to Vietnam, I would just as a layman, I'm not a scholar, like the other people on the dais, but as a layman, I find the philosophy and the method and the teaching of the Buddha of great relevance and very attractive and of great relevance to our contemporary world, to the world that we live in. And the first most important thing is his focus on rational thought. He said that you test my teachings in your own life, in your own experience. If they work for you, you accept them. He did not say just because I'm saying something, you have to accept it. So rational thought, use your mind, your reason, test it in your own life, and then decide whether it works for you or not. The second very important message, especially when we live in a world of conflict, was this idea of tolerance and compassion, which basically means you must respect and give dignity to different points of view. You may have one point of view, but somebody else may have a different point of view, have different concerns. So tolerance for diversity, tolerance for pluralism, and to respect and try and understand what the other person is saying. I think this is also extremely important. The third tradition that I find, which is also there in Hinduism, of debate and discussion. We call it Shastrarth, that you discuss the fine points of your tradition and you debate among scholars and students and then arrive at some sort of a compromise. So I think this is really what diplomacy is about. I mean, if the world is not to descend into war, you have to debate, discuss, and try and find some common ground, some solution. And the most important message, I think, is of the middle path, which means you don't absolutely stick to your position. The other person doesn't absolutely stick to his or her position. So both of you compromise. There is give and take. And you come to the middle ground. And I think that is of such great relevance to the global society that we live in. Don't have excesses in your life. Always seek, moderation in everything you do, in your thinking, in your actions, in your behavior. And I think that has great relevance for, global peace, for resolution of conflict, for societies that are diverse, how to grow together, how to pull together. And so I think this message really needs to be seen not only in terms of the situation existing at the time of the Buddha when he was preaching this philosophy, but really to see how significantly it is relevant to our modern days, to our modern lives and the societies that we run. So I think it's a great occasion that we are discussing this, and this is a very significant link between India and Vietnam. And now we have direct flights, between India and many parts of Vietnam, between parts of India, many parts of Vietnam, very reasonable for our flight from Hanoi to Delhi. So a lot of visitors are going in both directions. I think the Indian tourists in Vietnam are perhaps, one of the biggest groups in that country. And similarly, we have many Vietnamese coming here as well. And this tradition of Buddhism is very old. I was just speaking to a Vietnamese monk, and he said it's more than 2,000 years old, and Buddhism went to China from India through Vietnam. So it's a very ancient tradition. And in modern times, I've been to the Chan Quoc Pagoda in the West Lake in Hanoi, where you see this magnificent Bodhi tree that was planted by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, our first president in 1959. And that tree has really grown now. I mean, it's a very strong, some of you may have seen it. And it's like the relationship between our two countries, which has also grown very robust, very strong, and very important, not only for the two countries, but also for regional and global peace and security. And today we have a comprehensive strategic partnership between our two governments and growing relationship between our two peoples. And in Vietnam also we see a huge interest in Buddhism. India is undertaking the restoration of the Cham monuments in Misan. So there's a lot of interest, and I think from a cultural and a civilizational perspective, I think this is something that will really bind the peoples of the two countries together. So thank you once again, and I'm very happy to chair the session with very eminent panelists and scholars, and I hope to learn a lot from this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Ranjit Raiji, for setting the stage, for the proceedings that I believe would be very important. He has eloquently highlighted on the need of, how, the traditional values of empathy, compassion, would be extremely important in the context of the present time. We have four very interesting, very, very important panelists amongst us. So it will be important that we listen to them, and we'll go according to the list that I have. So it is not in terms of serial. So we'll have first, we'll listen to Sri Baladas Goshalji. He has been a former professor and chair in Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has been a distinguished advisor to Ritma Foundation and has extensively done research in the areas of peace building, conflicts, and other areas. So we would first like to hear Sri Baladas Goshalji, and he will be speaking on Vietnam's place in India's civilizational interactions, people-to-people relations, strategic and geopolitical outlook. So may I welcome Sri Baladas Goshalji to kindly share a few words.
15 to 20 minutes. The first bell will ring after 15.
Actually, we are late by a few minutes, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the other distinguished people who are here. My father was also a teacher. When I was about 8 or 9 years, he once told me that if you can't summarize your words in about 3 sentences, then you don't have anything to say. So the 15 minutes wording is a good wording, and the last 65 years of teaching has given me that training. If it is 15 minutes, I'll end in 15 minutes. Anyway, The subject is very broad. The kind of things that I've been asked to talk about, the ancient links, people-to-people relationship, strategic partnership, and the present context of relationship between India and Vietnam. I think the broad sweep, I'll try to present some of my own sort of ideas on that. And since there are other distinguished speakers, particularly on the subject of Buddhism, the link between India and Vietnam on this particular aspect, I think there are better persons to talk about it. So I'll just sort of, give a broad kind of a sort of picture of that and how that is relevant today and in terms of our understanding. I'm not talking so much about the relationship, but understanding of Southeast Asia, because relationship cannot be built unless you understand, unless you respect other cultures and don't see everything of your own in their culture, their local genius and the kind of assimilation and the kind of things that they have done over the years, I think is something which need to be understood, and only then we can build up the relationship. I think the most important aspect of Southeast Asian sort of attitude towards life, almost all the countries. Many years back, when I was a student doing my PhD in Indonesia, Dr. Muhammad Hatta, who was the vice president of Indonesia in the 50s, along with Dr. Sukarno, he told me a very interesting thing, that you eat orange, he asked me. I said, yes. What do you take from the orange? I said, yes, I take the sort of juice and other things. He said, we Southeast Asians are like that. We take the juice out of the thing and leave what is not relevant or what cannot be taken. I think that attitude towards culture and religion, to my mind, is also very similar. And here I would say that even Buddhism, that has spread to Vietnam and influence in certain other countries, but particularly in Vietnam, I would call it a syncretic approach to religion, that they have not given up their own beliefs, customs, traditions, their way of looking at things. They have assimilated Buddhism into their own belief system and cultures, and then through integration and sort of adaptation that they've done it. And if you look at Buddhism influence on Vietnam, from people talk about the influence going into 1st and 2nd century from that time onwards. Some people say that it went to the traders who were monks sometimes, and through various other influences, but go into those details. But what had happened is that at every stage, whatever influence had gone, because Buddhism itself is not a unified kind of a belief system. There are various things about Mahayana, Theravada, Zen Buddhism, various others. Now, all these schools of thought within Buddhist philosophy and practice have been assimilated, adapted, and then taken the essence out of it and put them into practice through their own beliefs and cultural systems. That is what had happened in Vietnam, and that is why the Buddhism that they practice is also not any particular school, although Mahayana has better influence over the period of time. Initially it was Savakayana, and later on it became more Mahayana oriented, and it also became influenced by Zen Buddhism, which of course China's influence into the system, and also because of the fact that it was more stronger in northern Vietnam, and which is closer to China, whereas the Indian cultural influences you see more in central and southern Vietnam, Cham, and all those things. Now, there are other speakers to talk more on that. So that is one aspect that I wanted to highlight. The second aspect is that the best period of Buddhist influence on Vietnam was between 10th and 14th century under two major dynasties. And that was the time, because royal patronage, that's another factor, that it is always, religious, cultural, art, everything, flourished to a large extent under the royal patronage or patronage of the government or some way or the other. Now, this was the period of the golden period from my own reading of the Vietnamese Buddhism, 10th to 14th century. Subsequent period, of course, and actually between the 10th and 14th century, much of this art, literature, and the various kinds of things, the cultural things that you see in Vietnam today, flourished during that period mostly. At a later period, it waxed and went in the sense that certain dynasties gave greater influence to it and certain others gave influence to others. And China, of course, dominated Vietnam for a large number of years. So China also had a lot of influences on Vietnamese way of life, culture, and various other aspects. Now, during the colonial period, of course, greater emphasis was given to Christianity. But even within that, the Buddhism flourished in the sense that people still retained their daily way of life, their own way of thinking at life in a broader philosophical manner, and Buddhism also played an important role during that period. Now, in the post-independence period, I think post-colonial period rather, I would say that they have been giving much greater stress on how Buddhism would flourish in the country, and their belief system is also geared to a large extent to Buddhist thoughts and Buddhist ideas. So that's one part of the story that sort of we have when you deal with Vietnam. The second part of the story is our sort of what you see, our solidarity and sympathy with the Vietnamese struggle for independence against first the French colonialism and second the American colonialism in Vietnam. Now, during this period, I would argue, although Mahatma Gandhi had sent, message of solidarity with the Vietnamese, with Dr. to Ho Chi Minh, but if you look at India's approach to independent movements in Southeast Asia, India played a very significant role in the case of Indonesian independence. And not only through sort of supporting Indonesia at the United Nations, which was most essential, along with Australia, India played a great role in terms of Indonesia's independence struggle. And various other ways, Biju Patnaik, rescued at one point of time Dr. Hatta and Shahid, Muhammad Shahid, and brought them to India. Shahid was brought to India so that he could travel all over India, all over the world to propagate Indonesia's struggle for independence. I would say that during that period, until Dien Bien Phu, where the Vietnamese actually defeated the French colonial ruler in an open battle, till that time, India did not sort of only express solidarity, but didn't play much of a role in that sense of the term, like compared to Indonesia. Now, it is only after the Dien Bien Phu, and in this, I would also argue that more than the government, people, Vietnam became almost a name in the household of, at least from my own state, West Bengal. the struggle that they carried out against American imperialism was something which was considered to be a great struggle. And there were slogans like Aman Nam Vietnam and things of that sort in the case of India, in the case of Bengal and many other parts where. And I think the people's support became much more important, the solidarity in terms of building the relationship between India and Vietnam. Ideology played also an important role, but more than that, I think it is the solidarity for emancipation from the colonial rule that struck a kind of a chord between India and Vietnam, particularly in the post-Dien Bien Phu period. So I think people's role in terms of development of Vietnam's India-Vietnam relationship need to be recognized very greatly, I would say. I mean, no other country's relationship is so much determined by people's solidarity with another people, and it's only in the case of Vietnam that happened. Now I will talk about more contemporary kind of thing, and where does Vietnam stand in our Indian sort of foreign policy, as well as in terms of India's vision of peace and prosperity and solidarity in the case of Southeast Asia, as well as in Indo-Pacific. I think the Lucist policy, which later on became Actist policy, and until about 2001, around that time, the thrust was actually on economy. India was a latecomer in globalization, and India thought that Southeast Asia could be a stepping stone into its entry into global market. And that's why the thrust was more on the economy. But as China became assertive in the post-2000 period, the veneer of peaceful rise of China disappeared. Only then India became much more realistic in terms of looking at Southeast Asia not as an entry point for globalization, for building strategic partnership between India and some of the countries of Southeast Asia. And Vietnam fitted very much into that framework. And I think the first strategic partnership was signed, if I can remember very correctly, was George Fernandez. He was the defense minister at that time, and he visited Vietnam, and it was during his time that that first strategic partnership was signed between India and Vietnam. China, I think, played a very important role in our building relationship. I mean, it was one of the major drivers in that relationship that was built over a period of time. And I think in terms of building a common stand on various international issues, I think we also developed a very close understanding with Vietnam. And there are a whole lot of institutional mechanisms through which such relationships are conducted. Each and every sphere, you talk about defense, you talk about economy, you talk about foreign ministers' interactions. There are a lot of institutional arrangements through many of these things are carried out, building a common stand, a common understanding on various issues of international relations. That is one major aspect of this strategic partnership as I look at the whole thing. I think out of the whole gamut of relationship, a few things stand out in terms of the relationship that was built. One, of course, the most important of that is in terms of its volume and other things, is defense and other kinds of cooperation, training, capacity building, and various other things. Development support or development relationship is also another aspect. and India has supported various kinds of projects in order to build up capacities for the Vietnamese and to also share Vietnamese experience in many other issues. And we have also learned a lot of things from Vietnam, how they have, tackled many of their nation building processes in terms of agriculture, in terms of various other issues. There have been joint cooperation. And India had also supported with financial support in terms of loans and grants and other things in that particular aspect. Then I think the strategic partnership developed into a comprehensive strategic partnership. And now in 2024, when the Vietnamese Prime Minister had come to India, I think we had also, envisioned a kind of a policy programs, how to develop that comprehensive strategic partnership into reality, and various aspects in which the relationship could be built and strengthened in order to have a common understanding of the global order as well as the regional order. A plan of action between 24 and 28. But, the world is also changing. The strategic environment has also undergone certain transformation over the last couple of years. And I think it had also impacted India's approach towards the region and its relationship. Now, one point that I would try to, not being too much politically correct kind of an analysis, one of the weaknesses to my mind in our relationship with Southeast Asia or our active policy is our economy, trade. I think, to my mind, that's the Achilles heel. Today's world power is not so much determined by how much weapons that you possess. I think how much economic heft that you possess. That's the source of power. And interestingly, in the last 3 years, I have followed. In fact, for the last 10 years, I've been following Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, their survey of Southeast Asia perceptions, how the Southeast Asians view the world. In the last 2 years, 24 and the latest one, which has not been as yet, officially announced, it will be done on the 4th of April in Singapore. In both these reports, China happens to be the most important country, economically as well as otherwise. It has 65.5 ratings. America fell down from 69 to 46. And interestingly, India's name doesn't come very much in that report. India is considered to be a trusted country, but in terms of their overall vision in that thing, it was not occupying a very important position. I think the main reason for that is the trade relationship, which is only about, I think, 11 point something is the billion trade between India and Vietnam. China's come at least 15 times more than that. China is the largest trading partner of 130 countries in the world and all the Southeast Asian countries. There are serious problems between Southeast Asia and Vietnam, Southeast Asia and China, particularly in the South China Sea. But interestingly, what I've been observing, that in last 2 years, all the Southeast Asian countries, although from once in a while you hear about clashes, fishing boats, fishing militia of China clashing, and China is creeping, China's creeping occupation. But this doesn't come so much in the news of Southeast Asian countries. They're underplaying that, but emphasizing greatly on China's Belt and Road Initiative and economic cooperation. Now, why? I think they don't trust the West, the United States, and particularly more under Trump. It has created a big uncertainty for many of these countries. Interesting, the Southeast Asian countries' governments depend their legitimacy on economy, not on others. They don't mention constitution, democracy, and these are issues come out from time to time. But their main source of legitimacy is economic prosperity, economic development. And they are extremely worried that Trump's attitude, this kind of transactional approach to the whole thing, trade and various other issues, it's not only trade, but on other strategic issues. The whole Ukraine plan is practically throwing the Ukrainians to the wolves. The kind of agreement that he wants to sign and all that. So this creates a tremendous uncertainty. And I've been following in Indonesian, Malaysian, Thai, Filipino newspapers. Filipino has given 4 extra bases to the Americans in order to stand out against China. Even Filipino president has been emphasizing that Belt and Road Initiative and economic sort of cooperation with China. And their attitude is China is a neighbor. It is going to stay. We cannot remove China from Southeast Asia. America cannot be trusted. And even there are doubts now whether America will really support Taiwan if there is an amphibious invasion on Taiwan. So I think this uncertainty is unsettling Southeast Asian countries. And to my mind, this will have an impact on India's policy towards Southeast Asia. And unless we can do something in relation to our trade and other kinds of, relationship is always based on how much you can offer. What is your, quality of your product, like any business. Now, India will have to evolve or think in terms of something which can be its own, different from others. Only then I think we can have a greater active policy rather than just concentrating only Look East. Look East will not help much unless really the action is there, and the action needs to be in the economic sphere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm extremely sorry for having to, ask you to conclude that in 2 minutes. I really love to hear you, you have shared your very profound insights on the creative dynamism of the Southeast Asia, connect with the rich Buddhist philosophy heritage, and how in the context of Indo-Vietnam relationship, we cannot ignore the contribution of people's solidarity, which has in a way been instrumental in shaping the ties between the two nations, great nations. And you have also raised some important concern in the context of how we need to revisit the relations between India and Vietnam. Of course, we don't have much time, so we cannot elaborate much. But with that, I would like to invite Dr. Thi Ha Cha, if I have not been able to pronounce correctly, my apologies. He's an independent scholar who specializes in Buddhism. His research interests focuses on Mahayana Buddhism and engaged Buddhism. He's a alumni of illustrious Delhi University. So may I ask you to share your thoughts on the role of the Buddhist heritage in strengthening Indo-Vietnam relations. He will talk about the cultural diplomacy and soft power relations. I also request you to please confine your arguments in 20 minutes.
Oh, I will frame it only. Not yet. Namaste. Honorable Chairperson Sri Ranjit Raya, esteemed author and former ambassador of India. Distinguished moderators, Professor Sanjeev Kumar, Zakir Hussain, Delhi College, University of Delhi. Distinguished guests, esteemed scholar and friends. Actually, I had prepared one research paper. Well, after hearing the ambassador and the professor, I feel inspired too much. Really, I learned a lot from them. I want to give him my time to listen more from him, because the former does look like Buddhist preacher. What he say is not about in researcher, but what he say from his heart and his life. That's a Buddhism. And here we don't want to talk too much about such a thing. So I just want to say 10 minutes. Frankly speaking, when I become the Buddhist novice, my first lesson my master teach me is fold your hand properly and salute the people come to pagoda. I was 7 years old at the time. So I don't know what does it mean like this. My master was 75 years old. Then I asked him, Master, why we don't do like this, like Vietnamese people? We have to do like this. And he said that we are the Buddhists. We follow the Buddha. I said, who is the Buddha? A Buddha in India. Then you see the young child. I learned like this. I know, oh, that time India is very far. No direct place, anything. I came to the university. I got the distinguished position. Then by self-financial, I come to the university to study Buddhist study. The first night, I came to the house my friend living. The landlady to become, she salute me like this, Namaste. You know, since that, from my childhood, I do like this all my life. I come to India, a landlady do like this. I feel very safe and very positive. And that, you know, all the time I live in the university, you know, sometimes it's a difference, but I adapt it very easy. I adapt this positive side. So is it the soft power we are talking about? Is it the people to people connection we are talking about? So you don't know the value of Indian culture. I saw many young people, they shake their hand like Western. They don't do like this. But I am the Buddhist. I am Vietnamese. They are also Vietnamese. But we always do like this. We salute like this. It's very nice. I still remember in COVID time, this is the best gesture for India. So what I want Indian people to show us, they are the best culture. Why I accept the invitation from society only 1 week after my Mahabodhi. You know, because now outside, people talking about nuclear, talking about the tank, talking about terrorists. We are here talking about Sutra, talking about Stupa, talking about Bodhgaya. Is this the soft power? We are doing the soft power. Am I correct? So that is why, you know, whenever I heard something from the Indian people, even the child, I also try to learn what their attitudes, body language, the sound language. I feel too much self. I learn a lot of from them. What I have today is, I think I learned a lot of from here. Even I told you, frankly speaking, they also stumble over the differences. Of course, this is life. The difference is like Ambassador say, we have to adapt, we have to adjust, and we have to accept. That's make our happy. So You just cannot believe some kind of young monk and nun sitting like this, look like they are nothing. But just after 5-7 years, you know how many percent the Vietnamese leader in Vietnam, Buddhist Sangha from Delhi University come back? 70%. It means almost 70% Vietnamese leader now come back from Delhi University. And you know how many Vietnamese monk and nun in America, in Europe, become the recent leader? 35% Vietnamese there. It means almost Delhi University now they produce Indian production, go to Vietnam and go entire the world. We learn, we respect, we apply, and we success. This is we learn from here. I also go somewhere, but I really don't know how people want to go to another country to live, don't want to live to India. Why? Because you're looking too much outside. Looking too much about the things. I don't deny about economy. I don't deny it. Because when the first trip from India come to Vietnam, the monk, they go with the traders. It means Indian products, sutra, along its economies. We not deny economy. Without economy, we cannot organize a kind of thing. But the thing from us is we are missing nicely, like the mission you say in Vietnam. They are adopted Hindu deity, adopted introduction of India. They combine with the local tradition. They make very beautifully. Now Indian government support the fund to restoration that nature. So if you come to Vietnam now, I can tell you, maybe you are fan of Bollywood movie, right? All of you. But in Vietnam, this is come from where? Tibetan, India, people respect you. Whatever you wear, whether you outside figure, doesn't matter. Because like me, why I'm not go to another country to study, I come to India? I come here not about a degree. Even I got gold medalist. Even I got go to Delhi University. It's very rare time. But why I come here? Because I want to look, I want to learn. My master said that the Buddha in India, he just say one sentence. That's all my life. Until now, I'm 62 years old, still very happy. Because I know how I am. I know what I am and I know what I will be. So I don't know why people want to go to another country to live. Living here, adapting here, support your life here, sacrifice your life here. This is India. I agree with that with Professor Engineer. That sometimes in government slow down to approach in Vietnam. But thing is like this one, the government they not do only for Vietnam. They do a lot of different countries. Some countries slow down, some countries is go quick. Due to the changing, because the world now is changing so fast. Like Buddha said, sometimes they change too fast, we cannot recognize it. But due to like ambassador, we know to meet the way. We don't go extreme this way. Keep our minds peaceful, then the wisdom come from there. We don't talk about the tank today. We don't talk about the tariff today. We talk about Buddhist Sutra. Can I have a few minutes more? And I take one prominent monk come from India. This is Thich Chow. He came here, he studied Pali. And as you know, that Vietnamese belong to Mahayana. But he came back to Vietnam, he translated all Pali Sutra. I am his student. And now Vietnam benefit. They can get Theravada from Bali, India, Bali. We can get Mahayana, also Sanskrit from India, and Chinese from Chinese. So we just only one man, one monk, look like them, sitting like that one. Nobody know. And after he come back, we change a lot. Now our garden not only have a rose, but only have another flower also. Indian in my mind, Indian in my life is a gracious gift to my life. I have disciples, I have friends. Any people come back from Vietnam or to another country, every year, then somebody come back here to visit India. They are very happy to see India develop, changing, and they are very happy to visit Bodhgaya. I don't know whether all of you come to Bodhgaya or not, but I tell you, 1 minute. Then when I came to Bodhgaya, I met a monk, Australian monk. He come fly very, very far to here. And he told me that, wow, Bante, I feel too much happy I come here. He said, what you happy? You get blessing from Buddha? No, no, no. I came here, I heard about the chanting, Bali chanting in Bodhgaya. I remember my people, my elder in the village in Australia, they also have the same Bali chanting. So how is the Indian bring happy for us, the Buddhist one? So please remember, today I repair this. I'm not talk. You to the ambassador and you to that professor inspired me very, very much. I want to give my time for you, friendly speaking. I want to learn more from you. This I cannot get from gold medalist from Delhi University, but the time is limited. So I follow the rule, and I hope that I cannot cross your limited time. Thank you very much, and see you again next year.
Thank you, Dr. Thin and Chan, for sharing your own experiences in terms of how the nation India has really led to, the way in which people from outside have come and found another home in India. So thank you so much for your. Now we have with us Dr. Dhruv Jyoti Bhattacharya ji. He is currently a research fellow at the Indian Council of Cultural Relations as World Affairs. Sapru House. He has done his MPhil and PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University and works extensively on Pakistan's foreign policy. May I request you to share your insights? Dr. Dhruv Jyoti, please welcome.
Thank you. It gives me tremendous pleasure to be part of this program. Indian Council of World Affairs has been collaborating with the Ishkal Society in organizing the Bodhgaya dialogues for the last few years. And having been part of such a panel, esteemed practitioners and academicians, it is like sharing views and as well as increasing knowledge. My topic is, the thing that I'll be speaking on is how Buddhism has been part of India's foreign policy culture, our diplomatic parlance, and how it has assisted us in forging new avenues, build cooperation, as well as how India-Vietnam relations have strengthened itself on such bonding. As I will take from Ambassador Rai's ideas, where our partnership programs, our friendship, our cooperation is built on some ideas which he said about coming to a point of convergence, where we share our ideas and we understand the ideas of our partner countries or our friendly nations, and then build a relationship based on trust, understanding, friendship, as well as cooperation. As today's world we are witnessing, it is not only wars between nations, it is within nations. It is a fight for supremacy, it is a fight for domination between men. For some such war, it is for survival. For some, it is for promotion of their ambition or protection of their own interests. There is a deteriorating value for life, deteriorating value for property, where everyone sees the other as a collateral. Amid such struggle, crisis, and challenge, the principles and teachings laid down by the Sanatan and Buddhism is the way out for a wholesome, holistic, peaceful coexistence. The centrality of Buddhist core values can lead to a path for nations to chart a path for a peaceful and harmonious rise, promoting global peace and harmony. Prime Minister Modi has stated that the roadmap that India has created for its development will be guided by the teachings of Lord Buddha. The Indic civilization has given birth to a number of major religions in the world. But despite the fact that India has host to a relatively small population of Buddhists in terms of proportion, India is in a position to claim legitimacy in its promotion of Buddhist diplomacy for a number of reasons. First, Buddhist faith originated in India, granting it singular historical legitimacy. India has also remained to be a site as well as close to sites of prominence and importance of the faith. India has also nurtured an image of being the protector of those who have been persecuted, or those who needs upliftment, or those who needs to share their values and bring their values out. Addressing the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, our Prime Minister had said that our world is meant for the principles of Buddha rather than Yuddha, emphasizing Buddhism as a cornerstone of India's global identity. He has reiterated this message in subsequent international speeches, positioning Buddhism as a key to New Delhi's diplomatic approach and response to global tensions. Notably, Buddha's teachings of rationality, as mentioned by Ambassador Rai, compassion, and the interconnectedness or interdependency of all things and beings resonate strongly in India's renewed push for a new normative discourse at the international level. These principles are seen as a foundation for regional cooperation, consensus building, and conflict prevention. For India, Buddhism represents not only a spiritual tradition, but also a diplomatic model for shared prosperity and connectivity across the globe. The manner in which Buddhism has spread throughout Asia through the centuries aligns with New Delhi's vision to see the world as a family, aiming to reconcile its global aspirations with regional harmony and prosperity across nations. Over the last few years, the International Buddhist Confederation, composed of a network of scholars, has been at the forefront of India's outreach to the Buddhist world. The Council is working towards expanding India's growing ties with the global community of Buddhists. Buddhism's centrality to Indian and Asian cultural discourse is acknowledged by all political spectrums in India across ideological ideas. The extent of Buddhist civilizations expands across Asia as well as the globe, is well known, and time and again has reinvigorated this facet in crafting its engagements with partner nations. It's simply that given the global situation, there is an ongoing conversation among countries to adopt some norms on international conduct which is laid down on the teachings of Lord Buddha. In recent years, Indian foreign policy strategy has placed greater emphasis on how power should be envisaged in its engagement with partner countries that it considers to be its family. While New Delhi's narrative of civilizational ties and use of Buddhism dates back from independence, it is now manifesting more concretely in its developmental initiatives and international diplomacy. The success of using Buddhism as a principle or a pillar for Indian diplomacy can be seen. In March 2024, relics of Lord Buddha and his two chief disciples were displayed in Thailand, where they attracted over 4 million devotees. A similar exhibition in Mongolia in 2022 received state-level honors. Some recent efforts include the establishment of the India International Center at Lumbini, the renovation work at Sarnath associated with the first sermon by Lord Buddha, building of the Kushinagar Airport, and the enhancement of the Nalanda University that Ambassador Rai just visited, which was the preeminent seat of Buddhist studies 1500 years ago and more. Furthermore, the ancient Pali language has become a focal point for the Indian government due to the publication of key Buddhist texts, including the Tripitaka in Pali. Originally the language of the common people in Buddha's time, Pali evolved into a sophisticated language as it spread to Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, influencing languages spoken over there till date. In October 2024, Pali was declared a classical language of India. addressing a large gathering of Buddhist monks, our Prime Minister reaffirmed India's commitment to preserve the words of Lord Buddha with their original values. Pali was the language of rich archives, records, and documentation of Lord Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, thoughts, and philosophy. This step will enhance preservation of documentation, their archiving, translation, and digitization. In recent years, New Delhi has hosted major international Buddhist summits, bringing together diplomats, scholars, monks, and monastic heads from across Asia. For instance, following the first global Buddhist summit hosted by India, the first Asian Buddhist Summit in 2024, with the President of India as the chief guest, reinforcing India's Act East policy, as has been mentioned. This policy emphasizes regional development through cultural ties, including the restoration of heritage sites, scholarships for students, and redefining of economic cooperation grounded in civilizational values and shared heritage. The Asian Buddhist Summit concluded with the announcement of the Delhi Declaration, which outlined a framework for cooperation among Asian nations, guided by Buddhist principles. Beyond cultural diplomacy, Buddhist teachings are being applied to contemporary challenges facing the environment, mental health issues, and combating disinformation. It has been opined that Lord Shakyamuni Buddha's ideals and path have a huge role to play in addressing the challenges of the present world, be it peace, be it harmony, be it humanism, compassion, or approach to sustainable development, climate change, health, economic inequalities, healthy lifestyle, and norms for social behavior. Our Prime Minister in the Global Buddhist Summit in 2023 had stated that the path of Buddhism is the path of the future of the world and the path of sustainability. He called for the lifestyle for the environment, or mission life, for moderating individual lifestyle and consumption is inspired by Lord Buddha's ideals. Looking at Buddhism in Vietnam, Buddhism is the second largest organized religion, with about 4,600,000 followers, according to a report of the General Statistics Office in 2019. Historians, we have already spoken about the origins of Vietnam, which monks now has stated that it reached their shores a century or two claimed earlier from India and then went over to China. Many Buddhist monks, scholars, students from Vietnam attend bachelor's, master's, and doctoral studies in the field of Buddhism, its philosophy, Pali, and related subjects in prominent Indian universities. In August-September this year, in 2025, about 40 Vietnamese scholars had traveled to India using Indian government's full scholarship for master's and doctorate studies in Buddhism, history, and Pali language at DU, Andhra University, Gautam Buddha University, Lucknow University, and so on. The presence of the Cham Balamon community practicing Sanatan and Buddhism as a way of life shows the umbilical connect Vietnam has with India, with a shared history, shared value, and a value system. Nurturing and learning from the spiritual connect that exists between the two ancient civilizations. One needs to recall the identity and strengthen this common shared heritage of the Sanatan and Buddhism living in the two geographies. Sanatan and Buddhism shared the same core tenets, though they diverged with the passage of time. Perhaps a study of the Boloban people, their beliefs and practices can shed light on these commonalities and divergences. I just mentioned over here that Phat Dan, or the Vesak Day, remain to be an important festival in Vietnam, as well as for many Asian countries, being commemorated every year as the day of Buddha's birth. Vesak is derived from the term Pali term Vesaka, or Sanskrit Vaisakha, for the lunar month, and the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, the holiday is known by its Sanskrit name Vaisakha and derived variants of it. The Vietnam Buddhist Sangha remained to be a major bridge in strengthening India-Vietnam friendship, and Buddhism has been and will always be a key element of the partnership between India and Vietnam. I will just conclude by mentioning two things. Buddhism, for India's diplomatic parlance, is not a soft power. It is more of a shared knowledge, shared experience, and shared history. as our late External Affairs Minister, Sushma Swaraj had stated, when we say it's a big brother, it provides a bit of a powered aspect onto it. But then if we translate that into Hindi as a Bara Bhaiya, then it gives that familial aspect of a family's heritage, a family's experience, a family's shared experience. So that is something. And lastly, I would take this opportunity of showing my deepest regrets and condolences to those who have been affected by the recent earthquake that took place in Myanmar and has impacted thousands in the region of Southeast Asia, and our heart reaches out to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. Just as we are trying to work a new global order, there is a need for a moral compass. And in that context, I think your paper was very interesting and important, that in defining the new contours of foreign policy, we really need to revisit the ways in which the humanity would be sustained. So in that context, I think Gandhi's philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, they work more as a kind of a bridge as we are proceeding towards more material prosperity and progress. So thank you so much for bringing this insight to all of us. So last but not the least, we have with us Dr. Sonu Trivedi. She's a fellow colleague, a very eminent scholar. She's a distinguished fellow at India Foundation. She works at Dr. Hussain Delhi College as associate professor. She has been a director for Vietnam Studies, New Delhi, and she earlier worked as the director, Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at Seoul till recently. She will be throwing insights on Indo-Vietnam relationship, intersections of history, culture, and Buddhist tradition. May I welcome Dr. Sonu Trivedi. So we have some time for discussions.
Namaskar and good morning to all. Honorable Chair, Ambassador Ranjit Ray, my former teacher at Jawaharlal Nehru University, Professor Ghoshal, my colleague Professor Sanjeev, Dr. T, and Dr. Dhrubajyoti from ICWA, and to all the distinguished guests and participants present here today. It's a personal pleasure and a delight to be here today at the 7th edition of the Bodhgaya Dialogue, which is being organized here in collaboration with, it is being organized by the Deshkal Society, ICWA, and the Ambedkar Center. Thank you. I would like to convey my thanks to the organizers for the kind invitation. Well, a lot has been already spoken about the impact of Buddhism and how Buddhism is a factor in deepening the India-Vietnam relations. What I speak here today is based on my research project, which is an ongoing research on history and cultural traditions, basically comparing the history and cultural traditions of Kalinga and Champa, and retracing the civilizational linkages that we have between the two countries. We have already seen how the other panelists have talked about the historical connections, the Buddhist philosophy, and also the India's support during the anti-imperialist struggle and also during the foreign intervention. And in fact, based on these shared cultural heritage and the connection that we have between the two countries, we see a robust foundation for diplomatic, economic, and strategic engagements that have developed between the two countries. And over the years, the relationship has evolved into a comprehensive strategic partnership. But let me go back to history. When we trace these ancient and civilizational linkages, I would be focusing on particularly the impact of Champa kingdom and how it spread from India. And it's quite appropriate to talk about this at a time when we are celebrating the 5 decades of diplomatic ties between the two countries. We need to go back almost around 2000 years ago. We see the impact of Champa culture and Champa kingdom being established around 2nd century BC onwards. and it flourished up till 14th to 15th century, and later we see how the Champa culture, which was basically predominantly influenced by Hinduism, got gradually transformed into Buddhism, and later when we talk about the contemporary Chams in Vietnam, how they have adopted Islam. And here I would also like to quote from some of the historians and geographers what they have talked about this. In fact, very little research has also been done on this subject, and it can be predicted that this cooperation must have been a part of India's ancient Act East policy. And R.C. Majumdar, who is one of the most eminent Indian historian, he says that one of the most splendid, though yet unwritten chapters of Indian history is the story of the growth of New India in the Far East. And this minuscule research to trace the political, economic and cultural interactions among the two ancient regions of Champa and Kalinga has led to resumed interest in the subject. Well, when we see the spread of the Indian culture around 2nd century BC in the form of how this Champa kingdom was established, we talk about the maritime trade, the cultural diffusion between the people of India and the people of Vietnam, and it has and this you can say this transformation has occurred into several waves, and with this we see the beginning of Hinduism followed by Buddhism and Islam. With religion also came language, literature, art, architecture, and also cultural festivals. The local people readily assimilated the new civilization and adopted the religion, art, social manners and customs, alphabets, literature, laws and administrative systems of the Hindu culture and how the way it spread from India. In fact, a renewed interest in cultural and spiritual awakening has bestowed a fresh perspective to understanding and retracing the Kaling and Champa linkages. In fact, again, let me quote R.C. Majumdar. He says, a double stream of immigrants from India flowed into Indochina, and then he says how people from Bengal and Assam, they migrated towards Indochina and entered the region of through Myanmar towards Thailand and Champa, and he says they established famous kingdom of Champa in Annam and Cambodia, in addition to other notable kingdoms in Lower Burma, Malaya Peninsula, and islands of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and Bali. Along with R.C. Majumdar, I would also like to quote what the geographer Journey had to say. He says, only the Indians of the Malabar and Coromandel coast spread to Indochina by sea route. From the Brahmaputra and Manipur to Tonkin Gulf, we can trace a continuous string of petty states ruled by the Kshatriya race, using Sanskrit language and adopting Hindu style. He calls it as Hindu style employing Brahman priests conducting ceremonies in courts of various rulers. Among such Hindu monarchies, we may mention those of several kingdoms in the countries of Burma, Laos, and Agranagra. And Agranagra, he talks about, when he talks about Agranagra, he talks about the Cham in Tonkin and Annam. Well, there are various other historians also. D.G. Hall has also studied about the Indianization of Southeast Asia. And again, our own historian Kalidas Nag also studies the Indian influence in Southeast Asia, and he writes that bold Indian mariners were starting to find their culture colonies in Champa and Cambodia, which is the present Cambodia. And from 3rd century AD, we find inscriptions in Indian languages and scripts in different parts of Indochina, especially in Champa and Cambodia. Indian religion and art influenced profoundly the life and the people of about this entire region for over 1,000 years. And in fact, when we deeply look into the impact of the Indian culture and how this Champa kingdom was established, basically the entire region has been divided, historians, they have studied and they talk about the 4 provinces, the Panduranga, Kathura, Vijaya and Amravati being the predominant base of Champa culture. And the earliest inscriptions so far traced in Champa, Java and Borneo, they have been written in Sanskrit and in purely Indian scripts. So these are some of the examples how various historians have studied the impact of the Hindu culture and how the Champa kingdom flourished in this entire region of Indrapura, which is the present day Dongdong in Vietnam, Amravati, which is the present day Hoi An, Vijaya, which is Chaban, Kathura, the modern Natrang, and Panduranga, which is Phan Rang. And in fact, this entire, the way the Indian culture flourished in the modern day Vietnam, the various temples, as has already been pointed out, the temples at Mai Son have been declared as UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site, and ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, is also like they have already restored the AHK temples. And now the agreement was signed last year for restoration of Block F of the temples. In fact, in 2020, the team of ASI had also discovered 1100-year-old monolithic sandstone Shiva Lingam. And this reforms a civilizational connect between the countries, between the two countries, and is a great example of India's development partnership. In fact, both countries last year also signed an MOU to develop the maritime heritage complex in Lothal in Gujarat. So not only this, we also see even in the present times like how the Indian government is also providing support to Cham community in building up their houses, schools, and also working for the restoration of Cham culture, particularly in Ninthuan province. Very briefly, I've just given you the outline of how the Indian culture spread from India in the form of this Cham kingdom in Vietnam. But one thing is very important, which is to be noted, that the Cham kings never imposed their supremacy over the natives. They were a peaceful and very assimilating people, and in fact, when they went to from India to Vietnam, they went there not as conquerors but as settlers and fellow brethren. In fact, moving from this historical and civilizational connection, let me also focus more on the specificity of the religion, architecture, and inscriptions. Again, I'll be talking about the same period. Careful attention has been paid by scholars to the Indian aspect of Cham art, architecture, and religious influence. And in fact, we will not be able to understand about the Cham architecture and inscriptions without referring to some of the French scholars who have done a detailed study on this. In fact, George Maspero's The Kingdom of Champa has been a path-breaking publication, and in fact, after this, there were several other French scholars who worked on the Cham architecture and this inscriptions, which in fact talks about this strong connection that we have between the two countries. So besides George Maspero, we have Henry Parmenter, who talked about, who carried out in fact large-scale excavations on the sites of Buddhist monastery, particularly at Dongdong, which was earlier called as Indrapura, and the Hindu temples at Mai Son. Then there's another scholar, Philip Stern. He also talks about the art of Champa and its evolution, and he talks about the decorative motifs that are found in these temples, particularly at Mai Son. Then another scholar, Jean Bolsler, he talks about the stone sculptures that are found in Champa. So much has been written and documented, but so far as the mainstream scholarship is concerned, we don't see too much coming out. And in fact, I would also like to quote another thinker, Percy Brown. He is also talking about Indian architecture, and he has noted about the similarities between the Kalingan and the Champa architecture. And you find quite similarity when you see these temples and the architectural style, the way they were, how these temples were constructed. You see that basically these temples were, the architecture is basically, you see it is constructed in the, they are constructed in group of 3 principal shrines. and in between you have the main shrine followed by subsidiary shrines placed in either of the sides. And also when you see the style of the windows and also the motifs, you see the impact of Indian culture there and impact of Indian architecture. So far as the architecture is concerned, I would also like to mention that you see the idols of Bhagwati, Shiva, Shakti, and also it is also in the form of Ponagar at Natrang, and which denotes goddess Durga. So all these like Shiva, goddess Durga, Vishnu has been referred to as Narayan, Hari, Govind, Mahadev, Vikram. All these names have been used, and also you see Vishnu riding a Garud and holding a Shankh. Then Lakshmi is also referred there as Padma and Shri, and there are also representations of Gajalakshmi. So these are some of the examples how you see these Indian idols and like how all these have been depicted in these temples. So certainly it talks about the Indian, the influence of Indian culture and religion in Vietnam. Along with this, I would also like to mention name of some of the kings. One of the most important king was Srimara, and you see it in one of the inscriptions there. And also there are references to kings like Bhadravarman, then King Gangaraj, Rudravarman. So all these were important kings of the Champa kingdom who played a very important role in spreading Indian culture and Indian religion and civilization in Vietnam. And in fact, Hinduism was Champa's state religion around this time. And later we also see that people gradually adopted Buddhism, and in between around 9th to 10th century onwards we see the people adopting Buddhism, and later Islam was introduced to the people of Champa, and it is believed that it spread through the traders from Malaysia and the neighboring countries. So I have already focused on the religion, culture, and also the historical facts about the spread of the Indian culture and civilization in Vietnam. Then you see, while talking about the architectural style, these temples were constructed without mortar using sophisticated methods of fitting bricks seamlessly, a technique reminiscent of ancient Indian construction style. So much research is already going on based on the excavations which were done by the French scholars and based on their findings. When you read the book by R.C. Majumdar, he has also talked about it besides the French scholar, and also you see under our development partnership scheme support is also being provided to the Cham communities. Along with that, ASI is also working on the restoration of these temples. Let me also briefly talk you about some of the inscriptions that were found, which also talks about the impact and the influence of Indian culture. One of the inscription I would like to refer here, the Anthai inscription, which is number 37, and which dates back to 902 AD. It talks about temples and monasteries by kings like Bhadravarman and Indravarman, and it refers to a monk called as Nagpuspa. Then there's another inscription, Nanbiu inscription, which is inscription number 43, dated 911 AD. It talks about the temples of Champa and Avlokiteshwar. Then another inscription, Kim Chosa inscription, which is number 13, number 93, also talks about the gods and goddesses like Jina Parameshwar, Sri Jina Lokeshwar, then Sri Jina Vrideshwar, and Sri Jina Devadevi. So these are just examples. I'm just citing based on my research and also these inscriptions which have been studied. Like temples of Shiva and Buddha were often erected side by side in this, this talks about how this talks about the reciprocal influence of these two religious sects Basically, as Professor Ghoshal had also talked about this, that it was basically based on the royal patronage. So the king being a Hindu king, and gradually people trying to adopt Buddhist religion. So these temples, they talk about like you see a Buddhist monastery with the carvings of carvings from the Hinduism. So at a place, even Buddha is Buddha is referred to as Damreshwar. And it is noteworthy that these figures of Shiva has been decorated on the famous Buddhist temples of Dongdong. So this talks about the reciprocal influence and how both Hinduism and Buddhism has merged around this time in Vietnam. And Vietnamese Buddhism has absorbed elements of Indian Buddhist tradition, creating a unique blend that is evident in the religious and cultural landscape of Vietnam. This kind of syncretism led to the development of unique artistic style and iconographic forms of both Hindu and Buddhist deities, where Shaivite faith had a great impact on the Buddhist rituals and practices. In fact, the shared Buddhist heritage between India and Vietnam serves as a foundation for mutual understanding and respect between the two countries. The teachings of Buddha, as well as Buddhist art and architecture, create a cultural link that transcends national boundaries. And as Buddhism has served as a crucial bridge in connecting India and Vietnam over the centuries, the shared religious and cultural heritage continues to contribute to the depth and resilience of their relations, fostering mutual understanding and cooperation between the two countries. But before I end, let me also share an anecdote. When we talk about the shared heritage between the two countries, we also need to highlight about the people-to-people ties that we have between the two countries. And in fact, not much is talked about. So here I would just try to quote an anecdote from the life of Amrita Pritam, who was a famous author and a poet from India. In fact, when in 1958 Ho Chi Minh came to India, he happened to meet Amrita Pritam in one of the ceremonial receptions that was organized for him. And when he met Amrita Pritam, and when she was introduced as an author and a poet, he says that both of us, addressing to her, he says, Ho Chi Minh says that you are fighting, both of us are fighting against the wrong values of our society. I am fighting with my sword, and you are fighting with your pen. So this intrigued Amrita Pritam, and later she was thinking, she kept thinking about this, that what is this wrong values which President Ho Chi Minh talked about. And then, and why did he take up sword, and why did I take, how did I take the pen to fight against these wrong values? Then she writes a poem which was published later in 1958 only in May in the leading Vietnam newspapers, where she praises. You can this poem is available. You can the poem is also available on JSTOR. You can just download and read it. But just to give you the gist of the poem, where in the poem she praises President Ho Chi Minh, and he calls him as a king and a saint, and compares him with a flower blooming in the autumn season. And she says that he's like a flower blooming in the autumn season amidst the political decay. And she, in fact, she wanted President Ho Chi Minh to read this poem, but she was not very sure whether he would read it, because hardly presidents, they get time to read throughout the newspaper. But it was just a coincidence. After 2 years of writing this poem, when this poem was published, she receives a telegram from President Ho Chi Minh, where he acknowledges, and he's conveying his best wishes to her. So this talks about the deep connection that we have at the level of people also. So though we have the diplomatic ties, we talk about the historical connections, but yes, there are several such anecdotes that we need to study, and we also need to work upon. So with this, I would just end here, and thank you once again to the organizers for the kind invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Sonal, for this very interesting presentation. She has, in fact, brought to us some findings of our own research project, ongoing research project, trying to, trace the linkages between the two historic, kingdoms of Kalinga and Chamba, and how, in the framework of religion, architecture, and inscription, the influence of the Indian tradition, confined to Hinduism and Buddhism, can be explored further. So with that words, I thank all the panelists, for, raising very important questions, and I'm sure the audience sitting here would have some questions, some, comments. But before that, I would like to invite Dr. Ranajit, for his chair remark, and then we'll throw open the dais to the question. Request Ranajit to would like to come here and for your remarks, chair remarks, because that's, I think, something as procedure will require. Brief remark, and then of course we can throw.
We've had such interesting presentations, and I must say I've learned a lot. And it's impossible to summarize everything. But just one or two points I wanted to make. One is that the word syncretic has stayed in my mind. So every tradition adapts, incorporates changes based on local circumstances, local cultures, and really becomes indigenous to the society where it exists. And I think this is really the great thing of these shared values, shared, cultural underpinnings that exist between countries, and certainly exist between India and Nepal. We've been talking about history and the Champa civilization till about the 14th century AD. But today, you can see this great revival of cultural exchanges between India and Vietnam, really based on Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy. And I think this is really a very welcome development as Bhutan is rediscovering its own heritage. Perhaps I should not use the term rediscovering. It's a heritage that has always been there, as a Vietnamese monk explained to me before the session began. But there is this great revival of this cultural and spiritual tradition in Vietnam. And India, that had lost the Buddhist tradition over the centuries, is also playing a very important role in developing connections with other civilizations, cultures, nations and countries on the basis of these spiritual traditions. So that's a great thing. I just wanted to, I have one idea in my mind, and we're talking about syncretic traditions, how each country has its own tradition. Perhaps the time has come to have a museum of international Buddhist practices in a place like Bodhgaya, where every country can come and demonstrate the manner in which this tradition lives and thrives in their country. And I think that would really be a great opportunity, for the whole world of Buddhist culture and tradition to really come together and show in one place the great syncreticism, the great similarities, and the differences. So once again, I want to thank Deshkal Society, for having invited us, and I hope there's some question-answer session, because that is really. I think the lectures were outstanding, but I think the most interesting part for me is really the interaction with the audience.
We have a few minutes, to take two questions. I think Sanjay, you agreed to this. So anybody who'd like to ask questions, have some comments, some observations, they kindly come here and then introduce yourself, and then we'll take 3 to 4 questions. And then.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Agustin Hobijam. I'm from Manipur. I have a question for Dr. Tichang Chan. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing. You had just shared your experience with us about your experience in India. I want to know what is your experience about Indian food.
You haven't developed the belly as yet. No, you can stand here. You want to ask for?
You know, the first breakfast my landlady giving me is a dosa. And when I come back to Delhi University to make my documents, when I come back around 2 or 3 p.m., at that time is the lunch times of Indian. She give me one chapati, one dal makhani. Amazing. So I'm vegetarian. So I like what you asked me. First dosa, second chapati. After the develop flat naans and yellow naan. You want to ask more?
Well, actually, not anymore. I asked this question because, in my belief, I believe that food is the only thing that connects people, even though they're different from different people. That's why I asked this question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you are young, so you think this come from the stomach to stomach. But when more grow up, you will love more. Because you see, you can love Amitabh Bachchan, Sarut Khan, Hrithik Roshan, but please come to visit there or the picture there. If you know how to enjoy your life from Asian to modern, you will become perfect.
Great pleasure for me to hear talk about the Champa Kingdom. As many of you may be aware, I did perhaps the first ever documentation of all the temples of the Champa Kingdom in 1995, very thoroughly. At that time, thank you. At that time, some of the temples did not have any roads also going to them. I remember one temple in particular where I had to walk on a railway bridge with no space to escape if a train came. But we got there, and that was one of the oldest temples, so we did manage to document all the temples. So the thing which I wanted to point out was that there was talk about the Islamic influence in Champa in later times. Simultaneously, I would like to point out that in 1995, I found celebrations and religious celebrations of the Champa people, which were out in the countryside, and lots of people collected. And it was very Vedic in essence. It was also rather close to the rituals of Zoroastrianism, which I have also studied. And of course, early Vedic rituals and Zoroastrian rituals, in fact, even the language, the Avastha of the Zoroastrians is practically Sanskrit. So the connections are very, very clear out there. And the same kind of connection I found in being preserved by the people of Champa, at least in 1995. And in the very important studies that should take place, and Champa should be highlighted more and more, I would like to point out that this was a great maritime kingdom. And many things, for instance, when the great temple was inaugurated at Nara, the big Buddha temple, the manuscripts which were used for the consecration probably came from Champa. So Champa was rather a key factor in the movement of ideas, in the movement of knowledge, in the movement of culture in the Asian region, and has not been enough studied. As a matter of fact, the second most revered deity of the Buddhists of Vietnam, after the Buddha, is an Indian teacher Bodhidharma. There's so many, there's scores and scores of temples dedicated to Bodhidharma. And this is another aspect which, though I have gone and seen it for myself and documented it just a little bit in recent years, but I've not seen it being studied and spoken about in forums. So I'd like this to please also be noted as a point which may be considered for much deeper study for forming these recent Buddhist connections between India and Vietnam. And to that, I would just like to add one little thing which is very personal. That is my visit, my first visit to Vietnam, which was for many, many weeks. I was going across the whole country. I found the people of Vietnam to be the kindest and sweetest people that they were. And the food was absolutely excellent. So I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
First of all, I, Anushka Jha, from Alcon International School, Class 8, would like to show my esteemed gratitude in front of you all. This discussion was really amazing. It touched my heart. And the depth, I would really like to say on that, the depth of the intellectuality I felt here was incredible. I remember a quote by Rudyard Kipling. He says, "Words are the most powerful drug used by mankind." Mom, I would like to ask a question to you. You said that Amrita Pritam and Ho Chi Minh, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, so writing and war as two different swords. So how do you think that we people as the young change makers, like what is that sword for us in today's current era? I hope you can get the question.
Thank you for asking this very interesting question. In fact, as a youth, in fact, as we all know, and we've been talking about this, that youths are the future of our country, or for that matter, for any country. And it is through the youth that our voices can move forward. So here Ho Chi Minh talks about the sword, and for Amrita Pritam he talks about the pen. So it is through the power of your pen that you can raise your voice, but in today's digital world it is through the power of your keyboards and mouse that you raise your voice. And certainly when you talk about the impact of social media, in fact in past 1 week, if you see the impact that Ghibli has, like, it's profound. Everyone is, you can say, influenced by this Ghibli culture. But anyways, putting that apart, in fact, you have this power. In fact, the youth has this power today through the digital media, through the social media. You have much to do. So that is one forum which you can use to raise the voice, and also to raise your voice in a constructive manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am Rituparna Ghosh from Dhamadipa International Buddhist University. So I observed the Jyoti Bhattacharya sir use the Sanatana, the term, but ma'am use Hinduism. I want to ask, Buddhism is not included in the Hinduism. There is many senior professors. So there is a debate. I want to ask, the Hinduism and Buddhism, is there any difference or not?
It's like, if we are basically, it's a debate that is still ongoing. But if we consider this as a civilization, it's like a tree with lots of fruits in it. And we cannot practically say that one came from another proportion, but it has all the principles it has a derivation. Like for that reason, I cannot practically say that Buddhism came from Hinduism. We cannot say that. But it is, again, it's like civilization is like a tree, and it's a fate of life, a way of living, how you practice, and each of these teachings, where whatever, it can be Sanatan, it can be Buddhism, it can be Hinduism, whatever way you see it, it's basically propagating how to live in harmony, how to live in peace, and how to basically bring this sense of living together. All of these teachings, whatever like fruits of that civilization bears, brings forth. Others can share that.
Although the question was not asked to me, but you mentioned about the role of the youth. See, culture can be used in different way. One of the things that I notice in our kind of policy, foreign policy, in terms of how we promote culture and all that, we give much greater influence on the religious aspect of it. But culture is not just religion. Culture is a way of life. And the way of life is not just religion. It encompasses various other aspects of one's Weltanschauung, kind of philosophy or worldview. And since you asked me about the young people, I think India also needs to take into account the factor how they would promote culture in many of these countries where there are remnants of Indian culture. The older generation, people who, my generation or before, were aware of many of these cultural aspects about India in many of these countries. But today, younger generation have no ideas about this Indian culture or the kind of sort of, temple architecture and various other, symbols of all those. So we need to really appeal to the younger people from the perspective of what they need and how they look at it. And I'm one of the few people, who have been started writing about this so-called soft power over the last 25 or 30 years. And I think I may be one of the few people who first talked about, that Nalanda should be developed in an article in Times of India sometime in early 90s. But my point is that the younger people are much more interested in their own development of their faculties and all that. And education plays an important role in that. And so I consider education also as part of culture. So in our cultural diplomacy, we should give a lot of emphasis on education. One of the statistics brought out by an Indonesian journalist about 3 years back, that today Indonesian students going to China for higher studies in different fields, technology included, outnumbers the total number of students that go to study in the West. Now, China may be spending a lot of money, Confucian Institute and all that, but the fact that these students are studying in China in large numbers, after 10 years, many of the students will occupy strategic positions in each and every sector of life. And they are going to have a different perspective of China's cultural influences or they're not worried about culture, but how education, from Indian perspective, digitalization, India's, what is India's contribution to today's development? The nuances of that need to be, what we can offer, what others are not. And somehow China has been able to attract large number of students from most of the countries in Southeast Asia. Chinese language is taught practically almost in Thailand. The attractions for learning Chinese is much greater than even some of Thai language. So I think education, now our education policy, Indian Council for Cultural Relations, offers scholarships to the students in this country. What kind of students come over? The quality is very poor. The best students we have not been able to attract. We must publicize our education. We must give room to some of the students in our best institutions, not in a nondescript university, and you just fulfill some obligation that you have given scholarships to 150 students from a country or 200 students. What impact those students are having in the day-to-day life of those countries? That need to be taken into consideration. And we have to actually evaluate our cultural policy from the perspective of today's needs. Religion has to be reinvented, re-talked about in terms of today's needs. And I think one of the things our tradition says that we can, but we need some innovation. We need some sincerity in terms of promoting some of the stuff that we are talking about. It's show of, we have given this, we have given that to some of these countries. And scholarships are announced. They are not publicized. So students will have to go into the website and find out whether, I'm telling from my own experience. I've lived in Southeast Asia over the period of almost now from 67 until to date. I speak language of those countries, some of them. So I know the people what they want. So, youth is the target that we need to have, not some old traditions. How the youth could be acclimatized or could be sort of initiated into those olden times through modern times. You see the past through the modern things, not just the past to see modern times. We have to also invent that thing, and then we can offer the kind of things that are required in order to build bonds between people.
May I just one caveat? I want to come back to that whole concept of syncretic traditions. So this is not a one-way street. Sometimes we in India have this attitude that everything elsewhere has gone from India. There may be some elements of truth, but it's a process, as the Buddha said, of give and take. This constant action and interaction. And we also benefit. So it would be very interesting, for instance, to also see how our traditions in India, which we say are very Indian, are actually influenced and enriched by what's happening outside. So, I think we should be a little sensitive to this issue. Because, I was also ambassador in Nepal. And this is a big issue because, we tend to say, oh, this has come from India, or this is Indian tradition. For them, it's very much their own tradition. And there is no such thing, it's not an island. Tradition is not an island. It evolves over a period of time through constant iterations and interactions. So this interaction from India to Southeast Asia or Indochina is not a one-way street. There would also be ways in which those traditions or the syncretic traditions that have evolved in those countries have impacted on our own culture and tradition. So I just wanted to make, we should keep that in mind. It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way process.
It's been a very fascinating discussion. I wish we had time, but I'm afraid, but we are only 15 minutes late, So I think that's fair enough considering the way we engage with, academia here and the conference. But I must say that we all have been immensely benefited through the discussions that we had today. What is important, for me to understand here is that the whole framework of trying to understand not just as soft power that becomes important in the context of how we are trying to imagine the humanity today, but the words like love, empathy, kindness, they are not just words. They are going to shape the future of human destiny, and this is how I think Buddha and Gandhi, in particular, I believe both of them are the kind of moral compass that when we are trying to understand international relationship, foreign policy, beyond the strategic geopolitical ties and interest, which is taking the world to disaster, I think this is where the learning will be drawn. I think this seminar in particular has really given a new caveat in it, and thrown up in a new kind of an idea, which I'm sure will be sustained in the near future. The whole idea of that we need to have a common truth, a mutual understanding of shared living, and that is where syncretism, the word that has been highlighted often and again, that we need to understand that the world in which we are living, it is only in shared living, trying to understand the other sense of the truth, and then we try to place ourselves in the context of how they try to define us. So that is how I think the international relations also will have to, take this into this context when we're trying to define the future of the humanity. So perhaps Mr. Trump someday will realize that foreign policies are not going to be, the way in which, but not only Trump, for that matter, international diplomacy has been in that framework. You cannot think Mexico, as something that is an isolated island, and you do not want to have a partnership. So that's what I think will be important for the succeeding generation. So in that context, I must thank all the eminent panelists. I'm sorry that we didn't have much time, but I think the discussion that we have has thrown enough questions for all of us, and perhaps some of them can be carried through the day as we proceed further. We have an interesting lineup of the events today, so I'm sure you all will be be a part of this interesting gathering today. And thank you so much, Deshkal Society, particularly Sanjay ji, for giving all of us this opportunity, trying to engage and learn and see the world in the light, in a new light. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Sanjeev sir, for moderating the session so seamlessly, and thank you to Honorable Ambassador and all the speakers. I would now like to invite Sanjay sir over stage. Dr. Dhrubajit Bhattacharjee has very kindly requested to present a gift to him, to Sanjay sir, on behalf of the Council of World Affairs as a token of appreciation. So Sanjay sir, please come on the stage, and I would request Dr. Dhrubajyoti to present him the publication.